Haiti borders with the Dominican.
Her name is Serena Buffalino. They call her Mrs. B, and her class always begins with a pledge.
Something local, something global. Haiti.
They're words that carry weight here. Helping yourself means helping others, giving back, here and a world away in Haiti.
And nobody's helping them, except for people like us.
It was through her the class learned of Haiti, of the nearly 1 million orphans, many with no school, no support, no Mrs. B in their lives.
They could not wrap their head around that.
Mrs. B's students are among Toronto's most at risk. Their challenges vary from emotional and behavioral difficulties to learning disabilities. Their trauma is so severe they can't function in a regular school setting, and we aren't allowed to show most of their classmates.
For most of the kids, most of society has turned them away. And in this classroom, they're accepted. They're accepted no matter what for who they are.
Take Yolanda. She came here last year so burdened and withdrawn, she would often fall silent, sometimes for days on end. It was, she says, Mrs. B's patience, her quiet encouragement, that saved her.
She actually saves people's lives from dangers.
And perhaps that's why these marginalized kids feel such a kinship with the orphans of Haiti, and why they were moved to act.
And so when Yolanda and Jackie and Patrick said, well, Miss B, we need to build them a school.
Build a school, no easy task. They started out raising money. They sold samosas, washed cars, screened movies, you name it. And in just a few months, this little class raised $20,000. So much, it's not just a one-room schoolhouse they can build, but a full 3-story school. And so Mrs. B set off on a journey she'd dreamed of, up into the dusty mountains above Port-au-Prince to a town called Canaan. It's home to thousands of earthquake refugees who live with no running water, no electricity, and no school, until now. The first step was a temporary school. It's up and running, 53 students already in uniform. The permanent school for 250 is growing from its foundations.
It makes me want to cry because she just makes me feel so awed, and I'm very proud of her.
All of this because of a handful of students back in Canada, and Mrs. B, the teacher who believed in them.
These are for you.
At another fundraiser, a special tribute to the students, accepted by someone who, without Mrs. B, might not be here.
They believe in me and I believe in them, and together we not only change our lives, but we change the world around us.
For inspiring great things and seeing the potential in everyone, Serena Buffalino is this week's Everyday Hero.
Good morning. Bonjour. Ni hao. Hola. Bienvenue. Wan Ying. Bienvenidos. And welcome to another exciting episode of Gem Hunter Stories. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And each and every week, I get to take you on a journey to places that you've never been before, to stories you've never heard before. Each week, I get the magnificent opportunity to take you on a mental, physical, and spiritual adventure into the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry. And it is my hope that somewhere along the line, somewhere along this journey that we take together, that you hear a story that moves you, a story, something that makes you see the world in a different way. I want you to come on this show, and whether it be this week or next week or 5 weeks on, to hear a sound. And for you to take that sound that resonates in you and use it as a bridge, as an inception point, as a template to help you discover the value of your own stories. And not only your story, but the stories of the people around you, the stories of the people that you work with, the man or woman that's standing in the store, that woman that's driving down the highway with her 4 kids. What's her story? Because once you discover their story, once you discover your story, then you will begin to understand the value of your story, of who you are. First, let me say thank you. This has been a very emotional week for me, and I want to thank you for those of you who tuned in last week, because you got to share a wonderful, magical moment with me. Last week, I got a chance to see one of my oldest and dearest friends, Don Allen. Don Allen has been someone who I've known for 40 years. 40 years. Don and I went to high school together, didn't know him then. Somehow or other, the universe brought us together in United States Marine Corps boot camp, Paris Island. We shared things together. We went through the trials and tribulations of boot camp. We graduated from boot camp together. We went out into the fleet, and there we became United States Marines. I've been thinking a lot about that. What is the meaning of friendship? What is the meaning of brotherhood? As a lot of you know, I just was a part of a wonderful book that will be coming out September 11th as we commemorate the 20th anniversary of 9/11, called Suited for Service: The Unsung Stories and Heroes of the Brotherhood. And as you know, those of you who watch this show, that I always make a connection between gemstones and people. And sometimes I don't know where those connections come from. They just come to me, or someone will say something to me that makes me start thinking. Last week, my friend and loyal supporter, Crystal Waters. Thank you so much, Crystal. Crystal sometimes calls after my show is over, and then she gives me a critique, and or she'll ask me a question. And last week she asked me, what was the difference between a natural gemstone, a synthetic gemstone, and an imitation gemstone? And I was slightly surprised, but I realized I had to remember that a lot of people don't really know the difference. So let me explain it to you. A natural gemstone is a gemstone that was created in nature. It was a natural gemstone is when elements came together. And because of just rare elements coming together in the earth, and because of pressure, because of intense heat, because of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of years come together and form something beautiful and long lasting called a gemstone. That's a natural gemstone. A synthetic gemstone is where all the same elements that exist in a natural gemstone are brought together in a laboratory. Most of the rubies, most of the emeralds have been lab created. So what people don't realize that when you say a synthetic gemstone, you are talking about a real diamond, a real ruby, a real sapphire, but it was just made in a lab. When you make a synthetic diamond, you're basically taking carbon, and instead of millions of years and tons of pressure being extended over those million heat being extended over those million years, you have it in a lab and maybe it takes 2 weeks. That's a synthetic gemstone. An imitation gemstone is where something looks like a gemstone. It looks like that diamond. It looks like a ruby because it's red. It looks like a sapphire because it's blue. But it's not really what that is. So I started thinking how friendships and brotherhood is a lot like that. Don and I are brothers because our relationship was forged in the fires of the United States Marine Corps, of being a United States Marine. What does it mean to wear the eagle, glow, and anchor? And I began to really understand and start to think how so few of us really understand what that means to call someone your brother, to call someone your sister, and not because they are your brother and sister because they have the same molecular or at least the same DNA, or you grew up in the same house, but a friendship, a brotherhood that is forged, that is brought together by trials of fire. That's what it means to be a United States Marine. And so few of us really understand what that. In fact, only I read a report, 7 to 10% of the United States population ever chooses to serve in the United States military. So many people, except maybe firefighters and police officers, especially here in Chicago, understand what that means to literally look to your left, to the man on your left, look to the woman on the right, and know that that person's life, that you have in your hands that person's life, and they have their life, your life in their hands. That's what it means. So thank you for those of you who shared that moment with me to rediscover my brother after 40 years. And yes, Jennifer, I was ecstatic. I was so happy. It felt, I know that I am 60 years old, and I totally understand I'm 60 going on sometimes 12, sometimes somewhere in my 20s, because that's what life is about. Life is about understanding the value of that moment. I thought about how many things that I had experienced in my life, whether it be homelessness, whether it be the successes that I've had in my life, competing in the world championship of public speaking, going to different schools, teaching, and after all, marriages, divorces, children, death. And here I was, standing here in front of all of you, re-engaging, rediscovering a friend, someone who witnessed my life and I witnessed his. So I was riding on the high of that for a number of days until in fact, before I go there, let me do something or say again something that I didn't get a chance to say last week, really with the feeling of it. I talked about the episode in Star Trek. And because I was so excited about re-engaging with Don, I don't think I gave it the proper power that it deserves. So let me say it again. The movie was The Wrath of Khan. And those of you who are Star Trek fans know that The Wrath of Khan, the original episode, was in the TV show. So Captain Kirk, had battled Khan, who was a brilliant genius. Kirk battled Khan, and he exiled him to a planet. And unfortunately, the planet was unstable. So Khan's wife and children died. And Khan was extremely mad and angry at Kirk, at Starfleet, for doing that to his children, to his wife. So his whole body was set on revenge. And in the Wrath of Khan, the movie showed his opportunity. And I won't go through the whole movie with you, but it always, of course, it's Hollywood. It gets to the point where Kirk and the Enterprise was near to the point of death. They were going to be destroyed. Khan was going to win at the end. Kirk looks at the intercom and says, "Scotty, I need warp power in 3 minutes or we're all dead." And Spock sits there. He raises his head, and you can see him thinking, because at that moment he knew exactly what he had to do. And he got up with no hesitation and went down to the engineering room to save his ship, his brothers, with no thought of his own life. As the movie went on, and he went to the engineering room, and he went into the dilithium crystals, obviously, gemstones. He went to the dilithium crystal room and did whatever he had to do, experiencing extreme radiation, knowing every second, every move that he made, he knew that he was going to die, that this was the end. But the only thing he was thinking about was his brothers, his sisters on that ship. And you know that because when he saved the ship, when the ship got full power, and Kirk said, "Scott, Sulu, go," and they got away from the supernova that was ready to explode. And Kirk came downstairs and literally saw Spock dying, molecule by molecule was dying like a switch. And the first thing that Spock said was, "Is the ship safe? Out of danger?" And the last thing that he said to Kirk was that I have been and shall always be your friend. And I'm moved by that statement because I know exactly what that means. I have been a part of an organization of people, of men and women and who were black or white or young or old, that came from New York, came from Kentucky, came from California. I know what it means to be a part of a brotherhood, of a sisterhood, to be a part of something greater than myself. So when I think about re-engaging with Don Allen, when I look at the people who I have served with, that all of us wore that emblem for 245 years, men and women who wore that symbol, and not just the Marine Corps, but the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, which don't get enough credit as far as I'm concerned. We like gemstones, we're bonded together. And the only thing that brought us together, the single bridge, the single thread that brought us together, is that we all, once upon a time, all of us, stood in a room, raised our right hand, and solemnly swore to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is our bond. That is the thing that brought us together. We are natural gemstones because we were heated by the experience. We endured the pressure of not only just boot camp, not only just being in the fleet, but for many of us, for thousands and thousands of us, the heat and the pressure and the horror of war. As I said, this was a very emotional week for me because I was reminded of what brotherhood means. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was stationed in one of the many places I was stationed was Okinawa, Japan. In Okinawa, Japan, I was stationed in VMGR 152. 152 is a C-130 squadron. And as I said, my primary MOS was operations, and I was also an aerial navigator. And at that time, I was serving more as I did a lot of operational work because of just flight schedule things of this. And my NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge, was a man named Gunny Brazel. I never knew his first name. Gunnery Sergeant Brazel was the quintessential gunnery sergeant. He was the guy that directors make movies about. He was that guy that just hard as nails. Gunny Brazel was just, I don't know his first name, but I'm sure his middle name started with E, because Gunny Brazel exemplified excellence. He was excellent in everything he did. The way he looked, his uniform, the way he stood, the way he talked. Gunny, in Gunny's mind, there was three levels. There was God, Jesus, and the Marine Corps. And he lived that. And I hated him for that. And I loved him at the same time. In the story of the book that I wrote, the thing that got me the most, and what I wrote in my book, was that the Marine Corps was the mother that I had and the father that I longed for. And Gunny Brazel was a little bit of both. And Gunny, when you get to be a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, to me, is the finest rank in the Marine Corps, because a gunny is the guy that had been through everything. And Gunny, I don't know how many wars he were in. As far as I was concerned, Gunny was indestructible. Gunny was probably in World War II, but I know he was in Korea, and I know that he was in Vietnam. So when I heard that President Biden had withdrew from Afghanistan, the first thoughts I had was not just of the people who are still there, and I pray for all of them, not just the Americans, the 15,000 passport carrying Americans that are still there, but the Afghan people, the people who helped us. And the reason why I thought about that was because of Gunny Brazel. In 1980, CBS News and Mike Wallace, 60 Minutes, did a whole expose of the Vietnam War. And the thing that they focused on was the Tet Offensive. For those of you who don't know, the Tet Offensive was probably one of the greatest battles, the most pivotal battle of the Vietnam War. And Marines were definitely a part of it. And Gunny fought in the Tet Offensive. And because of the way Gunny thought, the way a lot of people in the Marine Corps think that we win everything, we are indestructible, that few the proud the Marines is in all of us. And Gunny took it to the next level. And Gunny used to always talk about just being a Marine. So his attitude was that we're indestructible. Well, Mike Wallace in the 60-minute expose said that we didn't win the Tet Offensive. He talked about how we were in Vietnam for 18 years and we walked away pretty much empty-handed. That all the 57,000 people who had died during the Vietnam War, nothing changed. And it started with the Tet Offensive. So when the next day, that Monday morning, because 60 Minutes comes on Sunday, when that Monday morning came in, me being a smart ass kid at that time, I wanted to tell Gunny that, yeah, the Marine Corps is not all that great. It's all right. And I remember telling Gunny, guess what? We didn't win the Tet Offensive. The Battle of Tet, and Tet is was the holiday that they had in Vietnam. The Tet Offensive was what the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army used as a distraction, because everybody normally during the Tet Offensive you were at peace. So I came to Gunny and said, we didn't win the Tet Offensive, Gunny, like, ha, 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 ha. And I remember he looked at me and said, what did you say? And he said it. I can feel my blood turn cold and my voice changed, because I knew at that moment I messed up. And I said, Mike Wallace said on 60 Minutes that we didn't win the Tet Offensive. And I remember seeing the blood just drain out of his skin. He turned ghostly white right before my eyes. He went back to his desk and for minutes just shook his head, held his head in his hand, and he said, that can't be true. That can't be true. And he cried. He cried and he cried and he cried. And I remember right then and there not really understanding why. Because all he kept saying over and over and over again, names of people, of friends, of brothers that he left over there. So for me to tell him that not only did he lose his friends, not only did he lose his brothers at the Battle of Tet, that was all for nothing. So this week was an emotional week for me because it reminded me of what it means to call someone your brother, to call someone, to call someone and understand that they have your back, that they are there for you through thick and thin. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll discuss further the deeper meanings of brotherhood and friendship. Hi, and we're back. And a friend of mine called me and said I'm okay, and I'm okay, and I'm fine. But I want you to understand why I do this show. This show is about value because unfortunately, value has become one of those words that we just use. As I told you, I think last week that Forbes magazine said that value is the buzzword of the 21st century, that we just use it. But value has become that word. It's a space filler. It's like or value. And what this show is about is to get people to start appreciating the value of people's stories. I was in Iraq. I was in Afghanistan because I flew, because I was always in an air base. I didn't endure some of the things that my brothers and sisters in the Army and the Navy and the grunts and the Marines went through. And stories are so important because when you begin to understand someone's stories, you begin to understand their value. So I want you to take a moment today to think about the men and women who served in the United States military. The Afghanistan war lasted for 20 years. And even though MSNBC was comparing death and was comparing that Vietnam lost 57,000 Americans in the whole war, the 20-year war of Afghanistan. Only maybe 2,700 people have died. But what it doesn't tell you is all the people who left parts of themselves there. It doesn't tell you all the people who left their friends and their brothers and their sisters there. That's the story that you don't hear. That's the story. We have people walking around cities all over this country filled with the memories of the brothers and the sisters that they left there. And if they didn't physically leave them there because they died, they left a part of themselves there. I have the pleasure of working with veterans, and I am a veteran, and I go to the veteran hospital. I go to the Jesse Brown VA hospital here in Chicago. And every day, every time I go, in fact, I have to go later on today, and I love it because of the brotherhood. Because I know every time I walk, and it's a huge facility, but every time I go to that facility, I feel like I'm home. The title of the book, part of the title of the book is The Unsung Heroes of the Brotherhood. So every time I walk into that VA hospital, I know that those people, black, white, young, old, some of them fought in World War II. I met a man who was born in 1911. He was born in 1911, and he was still, he served in World War II. He is my brother. And so few of you will ever understand what brotherhood means when you have to depend on someone for your life. And like a gemstone, that connection is forever. When you see a diamond uncut, it's ugly. There's nothing to it. You might walk right past it, but once you understand what it is, what is the story behind it? Where did it come from? How was it forged? How was it created? Then you begin to understand the value of that story, of that gemstone. This week, I want you to walk away thinking about the men and the women who served this country. The men and the women that, for whatever reason, despite all the problems that this country has, and this country is certainly not perfect. I can sit here as an African American man. Yes, I can sit here and tell you all the different things that are wrong. I can sit here as a historian, as someone who enjoys history. I can sit there and tell you a bazillion reasons why we shouldn't have gone to Iraq or Afghanistan. Afghanistan was messed up when Alexander the Great was there. He brought elephants there and he got kicked out. When the British was there, they brought almost 1 million men there. They got kicked out. The Russians, I was in the United States Marine Corps when the Russians brought tanks across the desert of Afghanistan, and they got kicked out. And we, 20 years ago, we said the same things that we said in the Vietnam War. We learned nothing. Those of you who are old enough to remember Vietnam was supposed to be an in and out op. In and out. Sounds like, what did he call it? Shock and awe. Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense. Shock and awe. Oh, we're going to get in there and we're just going to do it. And it didn't happen like that. And I'm not here and it's way beyond my pay grade to argue why we should be there. I mean, I'm not going to figure out anything on this show that hasn't been talked about or figured out or hasn't been figured out in the last 20 years. But what I want to talk about today is the friendships of the brotherhood. of what it means to be a soldier, a sailor, an airman, a Coast Guardman. And when I say men, please, ladies, understand that I mean women. See, in the Marine Corps, there are no such thing as black and white. In fact, I almost got put up on charges because during the the Iranian hostage crisis, when the Ayatollah said, oh, all the women and people of color can leave now, and I was in the ready room, I heard that the ready room is where all the pilots and air crew get together. And I just said, oh, it's over. Crisis is over. A colonel looked at me and like almost ripped my throat out. He was just like, there is no such thing as black and white in the Marine Corps. You're all green. You're either dark green or light green Marine. How is that any different than an emerald? All emeralds are not worth thousands of dollars. You have light green emeralds, you have dark green emeralds, but they're still emeralds. Therefore, they still have value. That's what it means. Think about all the men and women like Gunny Brazel who are in pain today, who are mourning the friends and the brothers that they left in Afghanistan. PTSD, 50% of the population, whether it be civilian or military, 50% of the population never gets treated for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. When I go to the VA, there are people that look just like you and I, who you, when you look at them, they seem fine, but you don't know their story. You don't know what it took for them to get here, this place, at this moment. I don't know what's going to happen to all the people coming back from the Afghanistan war. I don't know what's going to happen now with all the military personnel who served in that war. And you have to understand that they served, most of the people that joined the service, especially after 9/11, joined because of 9/11, joined because they felt, they heard the call. They heard our country say, we need you to fight, to protect, to defend the Constitution of the United States. And that's what they did. They went. How do they feel now? How do they feel now that they're being told that the story that they created in their minds, the stories that they created in their spirit, the reason why they're there was for nothing? That it was a waste of time. Just like the Vietnam vets when they came back home and was called baby killers when they landed off the plane. Just like the vets that served in World War I or World War II, the African American vets that were called all types of names, despite them serving this country, despite them raising their right hand and swearing to protect and defend the freedoms, the rights, the things, the goals of the visions of what this country is. I want you, the purpose of this show is to get you to begin to value the things around you, the same concepts, the same techniques The same way you think of a gemstone and you value that gemstone, why can't you value the people around you? And the only way you're going to get to value in those people is you begin to understand the stories. Unfortunately, the guests that we had scheduled, they couldn't make it, technical issues, legal issues, things like this. But I already know that the other authors in the book, I know that we are brothers. I know that they are my sisters, because that we all served this, still getting that together, the United States of America. When we all stood, those of us who are Marines, we all stood on those yellow footsteps. That's what it means. Those yellow footsteps is the same thing that every Marine that has ever gone to Paris Island, every Marine that has ever gone to San Diego, the two boot camps of the United States Marine Corps, we all know that our lives began, our stories began at that moment. And everything happened after that. So what is your story? Those of you who serve, what is your story? Tell people what you went through. Because people don't know. The only thing people are thinking about is, oh, the war is over. But they don't think about what it means afterwards. Not just for the Iraqi people, but also the people who survived. The people who came back. People like Gunnery Sergeant Brazel, who is hurting today, not just for his fellow Marines, but also for the people that he left, the Afghanistan interpreters. I am hurt today because all I can think about, and I didn't know I had interpreters, I knew, but I didn't have that connection with some of the interpreters than the guys who served with them. Thousands of them. Thousands of interpreters and people who helped, Afghan people who helped, who believed in the mission, who believed in what the United States was supposed to do. They believed and they fought side by side in some of the fiercest battles. I was moved to tears when I thought about how the Taliban just retook Kandahar. Kandahar was one of the worst battles in the whole Afghanistan war. Stories. I mean, I've heard stories of what happened in Kandahar. Just like I read stories of what happened at the Tet Offensive. And what I want people to do, what I want veterans to do, is tell your story. Talk to someone. Let people understand your story so they can begin to understand the value of what you did, who you are. One of the most beautiful things about the Marine Corps, and I actually feel sorry for people who never served, not because you needed to have a gun. Jennifer, I'm thinking about you. I understand peace and everything else, but one of the most beautiful things about serving in the United States military is that brotherhood, is understanding that rank on your arm, those emblems on your shoulders, on your lapel means something. It is a story. When next time you see someone in dress uniform, you see their ribbons and badges and stuff, those are not just decorations. Those are symbols of accomplishments. Those are symbols of trials and tribulations that they not only endured, but overcame. That's what it means. Take time this week to talk to a veteran. Go to the VA. Volunteer. Find out what was their experience. What did it mean to be in the Army? Next time you go to the airport and you see a vet or you're in the supermarket, instead of just saying, thank you for your service, find out what their service was, if there's time, if they're willing to talk to you. Veterans need to be reminded that they are appreciated, that they're valued, that their sacrifice, that their dedication, that their perseverance means something. That the things that they left behind, the things that their lives was forever altered by their experience of joining the United States military. Talk to them. Find out what it means. And yes, you will hear sad stories. You will hear stories of horror. You will hear stories of just complete destruction. But somewhere in those stories, somewhere in the things that you hear, you will hear a sound. You will hear the beauty of what it meant for a Marine to give that Afghanistan child food. You will begin to understand what it means when the Marine who may be white is saved by a Marine who may be black. A light-skinned Marine and a light green Marine and a dark green Marine. What does that mean? One of the most beautiful things about the Marine Corps, or the service in general, is when you're in the heat of battle. Being a Democrat or Republican or independent or coming from Kentucky or New York or wherever, doesn't matter. We come together in those moments because we all believe in the story. We all believe in the eagle, globe, and anchor. We all believe in the commercials. The next time you see that commercial where you hear that man in his booming voice say, maybe you can be one of us. The few, the proud, the Marines. And what I will say is, the few, the proud, the Marines, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines, because we are gemstones. And like gemstones, we come in different colors, in different shapes, in different molecular structures. We have different characteristics. We have different qualities, but we are all gemstones. We all have a story, and when you discover that story, then you will begin to understand our value. So I thank you. I thank you for sharing last week, and I thank you for being here this week. And as I always say, sometime in your day, sometime in your life this week, take a moment. Take time to look at the people in your life. Take time to look at your friends and your family and discover the value of their story. My name is Barry Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Au revoir.
never felt this way before. I've had a taste, now I